Joining us right now is Tom Fitton. He's the president of Judicial Watch. And Judicial Watch, so much in the news right now. Of course, they were responsible for that Freedom of Information Act that revealed the so-called smoking gun email that eventually inspired the Benghazi Select Committee to be formed. And now, just this week, what many people are calling another smoking gun email, this one from Lois Lerner from Washington, D.C., specifically directing how IRS agencies, IRS departments who are in charge of following the nonprofit status of groups were supposed to be on the lookout, be on the lookout for groups that had Tea Party connections. Tom Fitton, thanks for joining us. When you got these documents, talk to me about what you saw when you uncovered that email from Lois Lerner. This certainly goes against what the president told us all. There was not a smidgen of corruption, and these were just a couple of low-level people in Ohio doing this.
Well, there are two sets of documents we obtained, one a few weeks ago and another batch that we just released this past week. And as you say, they show that the Tea Party targeting, the delays of the Tea Party applications, what was happening was Tea Party groups were applying to the IRS for 501c4 status, which is an IRS term for social welfare organizations that can engage in some political-related activity. And the left didn't like that after Citizens United. And the document, the key email this week that we released, and remember, the president told Bill O'Reilly on Super Bowl Sunday that we're low-level people making mistakes, not a smidgen of corruption. Well, that was all a big lie, because the email shows that the Washington, D.C. headquarters for the IRS was developing the applications for the Tea Party groups. And then they were going to work with Cincinnati, which was the local office that had been blamed by Lois Lerner and the president, to continue the application process. So it all was being centered in Washington, D.C., and not in Cincinnati. Cincinnati stood down as Washington, so-called, developed these applications. As we know, the applications went nowhere for years, and the documents also show there was this interminable pressure from Democrats, namely Carl Levin, who's a Democrat from Michigan who's now retiring, senator, to target these C4 groups. Really incredible stuff.
Well, you know, I'm just, as the more and more we learn about the IRS scandal, I'm beginning to think this almost smells like Watergate. It is like a political enemies list. It's like this administration was working through the IRS to punish its political enemies. I mean, this is big stuff. And you've broken big document. You found the smoking gun document on Benghazi that perhaps led to the establishment of this select committee. What are you doing with the FOIA process that Congress doesn't seem to be able to accomplish?
Well, you know, Congress sends out subpoenas, and subpoenas are, practically speaking, between Congress and the executive branch are subject to negotiation and creative interpretation. And when you file a Freedom of Information Act request, the Freedom of Information Act, a federal law that requires the government to turn over documents to citizens and groups like Judicial Watch about government operations, they don't have much choice. Then they have the choice to stonewall us, which they do, which requires us to go into court. Once we're in court, generally speaking, they have to turn over documents or tell you why they're not turning over the documents. That rarely happens in Congress.
So it's not just that you file the FOIA request, because, I mean, a lot of reporters file FOIA requests. It's that when they don't respond, you drag their butts into court and ask them to explain to a judge why they're not obeying the law.
That's right. We've had to sue the Obama administration well over 150 times now just to get basic information through the Freedom of Information Act. They stonewall our requests all the time. It's not transparent at all.
All right. So what other things are you working on? What other stuff is out there right now that you're in the process of trying to get?
We're getting your IRS documents virtually every month. The first batch of IRS documents show, you talk about Watergate, Lois Lerner got a call from someone in the Department of Justice talking about prosecuting the very same types of groups that Lois Lerner's IRS was delaying the applications of at the time. This is really not just an IRS scandal, it's a Department of Justice scandal. And, of course, with Benghazi, we found, as you point out, the talking points tying the White House to the big lies about Benghazi. They had blamed it, as you remember, as you all know, on the CIA for these false talking points that were put out there by Susan Rice, blaming the attack on Internet video. but we now know they're withholding other documents from us. So we're going to have to battle in court. We got some great documents, but they're withholding others. So the court battles continue. This administration will fight you tooth and nail in court, ways that we didn't even see from the Bush administration, who we had to take all the way up to the Supreme Court on transparency issues.
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that, Tom Fitton, because your group, Judicial Watch, has been slimed by many people in the media. They say, oh, sure, they have these documents, but, you know, all of it is it got to be put in the context that Judicial Watch is this extreme right-wing, partisan, wacko bird kind of group. You were very, very hard on the Bush administration when they were in office, were you not?
Right. I mean, we understand corruption doesn't disappear with a change in presidency. It didn't disappear from Clinton going into Bush, and obviously with Bush going into Obama. We ask questions of the executive branch. We're proudly conservative, but being anti-corruption and pro-transparency is something that Democrats and Republicans ought to be in favor of.
Push back a little. I mean,
Democrats and Republicans.
Remind us of some of the investigations that Judicial Watch has done against conservatives or Republicans.
Oh, well, we went after Tom DeLay and the whole Republican fundraising operation during the Bush years. We were critical of the Bush administration on conflicts of interest. We sued over the Cheney Energy Task Force. You may remember the left was obsessed with that.
Yeah.
But we're the ones who are actually doing the litigation on it.
Thank you. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Well, listen, I just wonder why Congress can't also haul these people into court. This is what I'm having a hard time. I mean, I really admire that you're doing it, and I mean, my hat's off to you, and I give you a big salute. You're doing good work here. But I'm wondering why Congress, which has subpoena power, can't also drag them into court and demand that they hand over the documents.
Well, you're right, and they should be more willing to do that. But for instance, in the Fast and Furious fight, where Attorney General Holder was held in contempt for refusing to turn over documents, that fight continues to this day in court. Just yesterday, they were in court with the Justice Department, Congress was, and the Justice Department essentially made the argument that there are 4 documents responsive under FOIA that they may not be able to get to subpoena, under subpoena. And the lawyer for Congress said, does that mean we have to FOIA to get these documents?
Yeah.
This is look, if an administration wants to be forthcoming, it will, and we won't have to worry about whether it's a subpoena or a FOIA. You know, the Reagan administration waived all sorts of privileges in the investigations of Iran-Contra. This administration we all wish we had Ronald Reagan around, but in terms of administering government, Reagan was much more honest in terms of cooperating in congressional investigations.
Tom Fitton, Judicial Watch, thank you so much for joining us. Yeah, and next time you get a breaking news smoking gun, bring it right here to WMAL.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.